Good evening, everybody. This is Veer Maheshwar Charitable Trust Latur, MS India, organizing daily international webinar series. This series is running from last 5 years. In this year also, we are continuing this series. We have organized more than 1,350 sessions, and this series mostly covers the women empowerment. Is the women empowerment series, and mostly women are invited from India and abroad, but few men persons are also there as the participant and the speakers. In today's session, I welcome Dr. S.R. Madhan Shankar sir, who is founder and CEO of Ashwinis Herbs and Foods. At the same time, he is director of Rashmivat Edutech Private Limited, Coimbatore. He also delivered so many speeches in various organizations and schools. Very active person, also CEO and director. We requested him to share his knowledge on our shelf and our shelves. So this topic is related to our health. And this series covers the topic related to health, education, technology, environment. So today we will listen from him about the shell and our body structure and useful thing for us which he will deliver. I welcome you, sir, and welcome all the participants, those who are joined here from in behalf of you also and our regular participants. I welcome you. You can share more about you, your activities, and then you can go to your uh, selected topic. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the good introduction. Namaskar. I'm Dr. Madhan Shankar, as mentioned by Principal. I'm founder and CEO of Ashwinis Herbs and Foods. This company specifically manufactures products which are less invasive in chemicals or chemical-free products. Because being an academician for 25 years, after teaching biology, cell biology, I found out that there are a lot of lifestyle disorders, which I'm going to speak about today to all of you. And to mitigate these lifestyle disorders, the main thing is if we can avoid chemicals from our life slowly and turn on to natural ways of living and natural ways of looking into products for our daily use, it will be good for us. So in that line, I started this company, and we have few products in our company which we are producing at home, and all these are 100% chemical free, and they don't have any preservatives. And you can see our website www.ashwinisherbsandfoods.com for the variety of chemicals that we have, products that we have. I'm also running an Edutech company which is called Rashmivat Edutech, which is a capacity building. We do a lot of capacity building programs for faculty, students upon request. Our predominant ones are entrepreneurship development, idea generation campaigns, and also establishing systems for educational institutions, particularly like ISO, audits, and so on and so forth. We also do corporate audits. We also do a very interesting program called self-realization to self-actualization for faculty members and corporates, which is a need of the hour. So, I have got about 4 patents granted, about a couple of 30 papers published in international and national journals, and a couple of awards, which I feel, I don't know whether I'm really honored to receive them or not, but then people have bestowed me with the award. I'm happy for that, and always grateful to God for giving me an opportunity to work for the society. So this is in a nutshell about me, and I should thank Principal Sir for giving me an opportunity to speak with all of you with regarding a very important topic called ourselves. So in next about 30 minutes or so, or 45 minutes, or whatever time given to me, I will impress upon you how it is important to take care of ourselves. Because you all know that today the amount of lifestyle disorders are increasing in a logarithmic way. For example, we have given very new names to several diseases. India has already become a hub of diabetes, slowly turning into a hub of cancer. And there are a lot of other diseases, including Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and so on and so forth. The basic reason or the basic fundamental understanding of why all these diseases stem up in a big way is that we don't take care of ourselves. We don't really bother about what happens to our body, what happens internally to our body. Now, if you take care of yourself, there are two parts which are important to this. One is not simply taking care of yourself for your lifestyle and for living. The healthy cell which you are going to take care is also responsible for a healthy next generation, which is required today. Today we see a lot of people, youngsters, dying out of cardiovascular disease at the age of 25, 35, 40, and so on and so forth. So sustenance of this life form to the next generation in a healthy way is our responsibility. So we need to see that the cells that make up you, that make up ourselves, are kept healthy, so that we pass on this to the next generation. Now, when you see the evolution of a cell, sir, the slides are moving. Yeah. So when you look into the evolution of the cells, about 3.5 to 4 billion years ago, when the whole environment was very conducive, when there was a lot of rains and a lot of water started coming to this world, small cells started building up. So these cells were initially called as coiservates. These coiservates were simple molecules, biomolecules, which were formed together. They just came together and formed a lipid layer around, and inside the lipid layer, proteins were embedded, and inside the proteins, we had the nucleic acid content coming up. So today's, whatever we call it as viruses, are similar to what protocells were formed about 3.5 to 4 billion years ago, when life originated in this universe. So from a very small entity of being a small lipid layer with some protein and with some nucleic acid into it, life started coming up in a bigger way. Then you see origin of prokaryotic cells. The first photosynthetic form of cell, named that is a cyanobacteria, came into existence. And from them, slowly started lower forms of single-celled organisms coming into the picture. And then they join together to form eukaryotic cells or multicellular organisms. And today, in the tree of life, we see that we are the top on the tree of life. That is not very true, because the capacity of sustenance is more to a lower cell than what we have. Hence, taking care of ourselves is the need of the hour, because the sustenance mechanism is not the same which you see in a virus, or which you see in a bacteria, or which you see in certain other lower forms. Yet, cells are adaptive. They are self-replicating units of life, and they are the meaning of the entire life. Now, when you look here, this is the tree of life. Here, you can see lot of pathways or lot of platforms going up, right from a smaller porifera to a higher arthropod or to a chordata, which includes vertebrates, mammals, and humans. In each of these branch, or in each of these branch of life, we have more number of species. For example, if you take mollusk, there are about 8,500 and odd species. For example, when you take chordata, which includes humans as well, there are about 60,000 species. But ultimately, as humans, what we understand is we are the supreme authority. We are the supreme authority of the entire evolutionary aspect, or the entire tree of life. We feel we are the top. But it's not so. Today's genetic comparisons and analogy studies show there are a lot of similarity between monkeys and chimpanzees. And there are also reports which say that the DNA of chimpanzees are much more evolved than the human DNA. So such studies are now coming up, telling that we are not the sole authority of the entire universe. We are not the sole authority of the entire life form. We are only a part of this small branch, or which is called as a tree of life, and we have lot to understand and lot to contribute to coexistence and sustenance of all life forms in this universe. So this is an analogy which says if we are made up of atoms, then a scientist studying atoms is actually a group of atoms studying themselves. Now, we are social primates. We are trying to figure out how everything evolved, how life came into picture, how molecules join together to form complex molecules, and how complex molecules join together to form cellular architecture, and how these things join to form a higher order of sustenance or order of living. So we are basically spending our time to understand only how evolution has happened. So in the whole process, we are trying to only mimic what is happening around us. We are just trying to copy, we're just trying to mimic what is available to us in a huge way. So it's pretty amazing. The curiosity had led humans to work out quite a bit of grand narrative of life and the universe and everything. And then we claim that we are on the top of the tree, which is certainly not true, because the same aspect of what a bacteria can do, we also do. That is respiration, excretion, digestion, everything. A single cell, whatever attributes a single cell are capable of doing, we, with this huge system of complex organ systems, we are also doing the same thing. But where lies the aspect of difference is in the evolutionary line or evolutionary bottom. Now, these cells, to grow and also to develop, they have to respond to a lot of stimuli. So here we have these the receptors. We have the 5 senses or the panchendriyas, and these panchendriyas are the ones which receive signals from outside. And signals can be either chemical signal, which includes hormones, neurotransmitters, etc. It can be physical signals, which include touch, heat, or pressure, electrical signals, which include neuronal signals, and biological signals, which include immune response or immune molecules like your antibodies, T cells, B cells, and a plethora of such systems come under the biological purview. So basically, for a cell to develop from a single cell, from after fertilization to a complete organism, requires response to stimuli, which means the cells are always in contact with this immediate environment. Now here, I would just go one step ahead and tell you that this immediate environment is not simply chemicals, it's not simply physical, it's not simply electrical, not simply biological, but also we have other hidden signals and other hidden aspects which influence our cellular architecture, which also influence our DNA architecture as well. And these signals and these responses and these stimuli are much, much more important than these chemicals, physical signals, or electrical signals, or so on and so forth, because it is these things which lead to what is called as the genetic memory or the somatic memory. And then these are passed on from one generation to another generation. So those are also important. And that is why when we normally speak about twice into 7 generations. So we call them as 14 generations. So our system is capable of completely rewinding itself once in about 14 generations. So this has a lot of meaning, because the DNA inside every cell or inside every developed organisms is able to change itself depending on the stimuli that it receives from the environment. So this stimuli need not essentially be hormones or neurotransmitters or something. This can also be certain stimuli which we receive from the other atmosphere. So in total, cells, keeping them healthy is not simply keeping them away from certain stimuli, but also keeping them away from stimuli which are dangerous in nature. So now Here, I would like to introduce something called a samskara, which is nothing but we are today equating this to what is called as a genetic memory or the biomemory. As I told you, cells are influenced by several signal or several stimuli. Now here, apart from all that, the mental impressions or imprints which are led in the subconscious mind by past experiences are basically called as samskaras, and we also call them as collectives or karma of the society. These influence, these impressions or these samskaras or mental impressions will actually shape the individual's thoughts, actions, and personality. Now, this influence on the thought, action, and personality will automatically reflect on how these impressions are taken to the future generations as well. And his future actions, behaviors, response, both at the physical level as well as at the cellular level, will also be decided upon by these impressions. So, though directly not physical in nature, these samskaras can affect the body through body-mind connection, impacting, see, health is very important. It'll have a first impact on health, behavior, and even genetic tendencies as well. So biomemory is actually a samskara. Now, to go with this, a small research work was done by a group of scientists, and they found out in this research work that they had actually taken a group of mouse, and the mouse were shown a food item, and when the mouse comes running to eat the food, the mouse were given electric shock. So this, they were doing it for quite some time, say for example 21 days or even more than that. And after that, this population of mice which received this electric shock before they consumed the food were all bred, which means they were bred and they were delivered pups, which is called the first generation pups. Now, interestingly, when this first generation pups were shown the same food particle, they did not run towards it. Rather, they withdrew themselves from it. So this experiment very clearly shows that traumatic impressions, which are again mental impressions, will also have a long-standing mechanism of impact on life after one generation. So this experiment was clearly able to tell that even if you have a traumatic experience in one's life, the impressions naturally affect the next generation. So the first point that is to be noted here is it is not very important keeping the cells healthy in terms of what you consume, in terms of what chemicals you are exposed to, in terms of what physical or other electrical contacts or whatever stimuli that you are exposed to. It is also important that you take care of how your cells receive certain stimuli like trauma. There are certain mental traumas which a person gets in his life is also passed on to the next generation. Now, to this, we also have a concept called as epigenetic modulations. This is also another very important and very interesting field which is coming up. And most of the epigenetic modulations are because of a methyl group addition to the DNA adenine, to the adenine group of the DNA. So this methylation has got a lot of impact on how DNA responds to certain stimuli. Now, when we talk about samskara and biomemory, epigenetic modulations have got a lot of impact on how systems respond to stimuli. For example, a person who is exposed to a particular set of chemicals. See, in our research study, we have found out with reference to polycystic ovarian syndrome, we have found out that impact of certain foods, certain chemicals on the DNA of women, particularly the cohort that we took about 500, 600 women DNA samples, and we found out that the impact has got a genetic transition and transversion. That is, the base pair converts from AT to CG. So this change of base pair happens. Now, these we call it as modulations. And when you talk about epigenetic modulations, what happens is that when you have continuous impressions getting onto the DNA for quite some time, these impressions fix onto the DNA, but they don't change the DNA. It is not mutation. Like when you put a mutagenic chemical onto the DNA undergoes a complete change, either deletion or addition or transition or transversion. But this is not a complete mutation. Rather, the expression profile of the DNA alters. That is, either it gets lowly expressed or it gets highly expressed, or it doesn't express at all. Now, when such a DNA is there for quite some time, evolution naturally has the choice either to eliminate the DNA or to do something else with the DNA. So this is how the changes to the structure slowly happens. This is one aspect of how our cells go wrong. The third aspect is to talk about the maternal DNA or the maternal influence which we most of us have. Now, all of us are half sibs, which means we are 50% DNA from the father and 50% DNA from the mother. But there are certain traits which are born by the mother influence alone, which are called as maternal inheritances. So, a traumatic expression to the women will have a much greater impact on to the next generation's sustenance. So these traumatic events can just be not about using chemicals or something. It can also be a traumatic accident. It can be a mental impression. It can be a shock. It can be anything. So all this will also have an alternative influence on the memory and the impression of the next generation. Now, having said all this, we understand that there's something called biomemory beyond all that we exposed to chemicals, etc., etc. Now, do cells have their own mind? This is something which we need to think and retrospect. Do cells have their own mind? Where is this mind? Where is this consciousness present? The cells do have their own mind. If cells don't have their own mind, then how will they be able to mind us? So right from generation of the first cell division, one cell divides into two, then 2 divides into 4, and 4 divides into 8, 8 into 16, and goes like that in the logarithmic phase. Now, at some point of time, during evolution or during the development of the fetus, we are a big mass of cells called as the blastula. And then we become the gastrula with the 3 germ layers, that is the ectoderm, endoderm, and the mesoderm. Now, at this point, what tells the cells to go and migrate to a particular part and form the brain, form the heart, form the neuronal tube, etc. So there are certain molecules which guide the cells to go to these regions and form certain parts of the organ. Once they migrate, they don't come back. They remain there. So cells are programmed in a very, very authentic way. Because they have their own mind, they are taken to the destination, and once they are in the destination, they don't come back. For example, a neuronal cell can never turn back into a muscle cell or a heart cell and do a heart's function or something. So this kind of reverse thing, today, due to scientific advancement, the reverse things are possible. But otherwise, the cells don't really, they don't really behave in a different way. Similarly, do cells have consciousness like our cells? We say we are a conscious human being. Do our cells have consciousness? Now, we have to think about that. Cells are very, very conscious at every point of time because cells respond, whether you respond as an individual or whether I respond as an individual, cells always respond to stimuli at all points of time. Throughout its lifespan, they keep responding to stimuli. Now, in the absence of stimuli, the neurons or the neurites withdraw from each other. So the kind of stimuli that is required depends upon the external environment from where you get the stimuli and what kind of stimuli you get. For example, during the developmental stages of the organism, during the development of the fetus, at several points of time, we have heard people telling that you will have to listen to good stuff, you will have to eat good food, you will have to enjoy good music, and so on and so forth. The reason is that the developing fetal cells are so naive, and these cells can really capture and respond all these stimuli. The story of Abhimanyu, you all would know, is a classical example of how he was able to learn to go into the Chakravyugam and not come back, because by the time her mother was reciting it, he had been delivered. So this is a very classical example of how cells also respond to the environment right from the stage of development. So these developmental impressions will also have a lot of impact on how cells respond to one another. Now, the second thing is, if our cells cannot think, how can we think? And what are these memories? Memories are stored throughout the body, not just the brain. There's a very important study which finds out that the memories are stored throughout the body. So that is why when you are very conscious and when you can regulate your breath, and when you are consciously regulating your breath, you can really heal any part of the cell in your body, because every cell can store lot of trauma in it. It's not just the brain, it's not just your what we call as mind or something. Every part of the organ, every part of the body can have the storage capacity of impressions. So healing is a very natural process which we have in our yogic and meditation as well. So you can really find out that cells can be healed by being very conscious and by taking care of them in a very nice way. So memories, as I said, is present every part of the cell. The next aspect is Panchakosha. We are governed by the Panchabhutas, that is the 5 great elements, and all the 5 great elements have a relationship between the Panchakosha. This Panchakosha is Pranamaya Kosha, which is nothing but the vital energy sheath which covers your body. The Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is the intellectual sheath. The Annamaya Kosha, the food that you eat, the food that you are able to digest. The Manonmaya Kosha, which is nothing but the mental sheath. And the Anandamaya Kosha, which is the blissfulness or the bliss sheath. So the Panchabhuta has got a perfect relationship between this Panchakosha. And any lack of coordination between these two will definitely lead to illness and will definitely lead to a lot of diseases in total. Now, can we think of the cells as robots? Today, we are all in a robotic world. We are all in a world where we have artificial intelligence taking us over. Can we think the cell as a robot? Of course, yes. When you look into the cell, the nucleus functions as a central processing unit which contains the DNA, but for viruses we have the RNA. So the DNA or the RNA stores the genetic information, and it's also responsible for transmitting the genetic information to the next level. We also have the power unit of the cell or the power of the cell, the mitochondria, which is required for the production of energy in the cell. We have a sensor sheath, which is nothing but the cell membrane, which prevents the cell which prevents entry of unwanted elements into the cell and allows only things which are essentially required to go into the cell. It is also required for sensing. Now, when you take a robot, you have a sensor, you have an input, you have an actuator, and you have 2 memories in it. Similarly, you have ribosomes here for protein synthesis, which is going to be kind of a factory unit, and the cytoskeleton, which decides the shape and size and movement of the individual cells inside the body. So, in total, what we today call as a robo can be analogically compared to the cell. Now, this Panchendriyam and the Karmendriyam. So, as we said this, We have this Panchabhutas and Panchakoshas. We also have the Jnanendriyas, which is nothing but the sensory part, which consists of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and skin. All these Jnanendriyas or sensories are responsible for receiving the inputs from the environment, which is nothing but the stimuli receivers. And then you have a Karmendriyas, which is nothing but the motor, which responds to what kind of stimuli you receive. When you put your hand into the fire, you retract your finger. So that is a response. Similarly, legs, mouth, organs, excretion, reproduction, everything begins with a sensory motor role. So all these motor roles are now in connection with the Panchendriyas, Jnanendriyas, which is nothing but the sensory part of your cell. Now, having said that, programming by external stimuli is what is very important now. Now, as you know here, we are all programmed by a lot of external stimuli. Now, as I told you before, epigenetics, the stimuli can alter gene expression, it can alter the behavior, it can alter the diet and environmental. All these aspects can write on our genes. Similarly, emotional behavioral imprints from ancestors, from the previous generation. I told you, people who have been under several traumatic shock, we still have those shocks in them. A small, I don't know whether it is comedy or whatever. Like now, whenever we go to a boss, we usually have a tendency of tying our hands like this and standing, isn't it? We tie our hands in front and stand. This is a classical example of genetic memory which we have, because for 200 generations we have been subjugated by the Britishers. So in front of the Britishers, when they came to colonize us, we were made to stand like this. So for several generations, this imprint has not gone from us. So still, when we go to see a higher up or higher authority, automatically we try to fold our hands. But in our custom, our samskaras, our body languages were not this. Our body languages was namaskar. That was our body language. We never tie our hand in front of anybody, and we stood in our ancient past. So this is one classical example of gene memory. Similarly, there are a lot of other classical examples of gene memory. For example, we might have had in dreams suddenly falling down from the bed, and but we would have not fallen down. But this is a classical example of gene memory, which relates us to the chimpanzees and monkeys. Monkeys usually jump from the tree just like that. So that impression is still there in us. And when you go sleep, deep sleep, sometimes this memory is actuated. So it is very similar to the memory that the robot has. We also have these memories in us. So when you're conscious, when you're very conscious about what your cells require, what stimuli your cells require, the answers to several questions are inside your body. The DNA has those answers because it has been preserved for several generations. As I tell several times, we come with a set of factory settings, just like how our phones come with factory settings. And these factory settings we modify then and there. To an extent, we keep modifying that we forget the factory setting. Now, when I ask somebody, will you remember what ringtone your phone had when you purchased? Nobody will remember, because we would have changed 100 ringtones by then. So during this evolution process, we would have done so much of changes to the factory settings that we had. And currently, we are now in a setting which is very, very bad. And you know what will happen if the total factory settings are damaged? You will have to reset. Now, this reset is not possible in the case of human beings, because you would have done so much damage by getting trauma, by getting chronic stress, by altering your dietary patterns, by changing the food that you eat, by changing what you are exposed to. You would have made so much of changes that this resetting of the factory pattern will not be possible, because some damages would have occurred very specifically on the DNA, and this would be now taken to the next generation. So this is where we talk about epigenetic modulation and the preventive yoga. All these things are required for upregulating our expression. Now we are also determined by what your genes are. So you are determined by your genes and the environment, and this is what is epigenetics is. Maternal diet pattern. There was a study which was done on a 1,000-day interval where the maternal diet patterns were seen to be very drastically affecting the cellular architecture. Now, food and cellular health and keeping cells healthy is very, very important, because this is one of the most first kind of stimuli that every cell can receive. That is the food that you eat, the nutrients that you eat, the components that are there in the food has a lot of implications on what you are and what you will be. Now here, when you see this, there are two parts of this. One side is a very typical South Indian meal, which is a very balanced food. On the other side, you can see all those junk foods. Now, foods, the question is, do they heal or do they kill? The question is, the answer most of us know. The foods that you see on the left side are all convenience foods. And the ones that you see on the banana leaf, they're all conventional foods. So what is our choice, or what is the balance of between the convenience food and the conventional food is more important. 90% of food that we take are junk. I will always tell everybody that every day, today's normal human being, he starts his day with a chemical, which is nothing but the toothpaste, which is 100% chemical. And he goes outside, eats burger, pizza or Pepsi in the morning for breakfast, goes to his work, exposed to 100,000 stresses throughout his life, throughout his day. He takes tablets in the morning, forenoon and the evening, and at the night, he cannot sleep without a sleeping pill. So starting your day with a chemical, ending your day with a sleeping pill is what most of the people are exposed to in today's fast, evolved, convenience lifestyle. So this convenience lifestyle is actually responsible for several diseases. It is some of what you eat is responsible for your disease. And today, as you know, because of these moving away from our conventional foods, we have got very good new names for several diseases like high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, coronary heart disease, cancers, a variety of cancers. There was a report which was published some about 5 years ago from Bombay, which states that the percentage of gastrointestinal cancer has increased from 5% to 12.5%, and now it is even more. It is more than 20%. The simple reason why these gastrointestinal cancers are on the rise is because we have completely moved away from our convenience foods to our from conventional foods to convenient food, which means to say that 90% of what our cells are getting exposed right from morning till evening are all chemicals, and these chemicals are not going to be really good for the cells to sustain and also for the whole system to sustain in a longer way. So this is convenience food versus conventional food, and we should understand what we are and what is today's lifestyle. Today's lifestyle is very erratic. Youngest customer in the business, abundance of nutrients, that is fats and sugars in the diet, for example, burgers, pizzas, and etc. When you go to a job, you don't have a peace to work, which you have a lot of emotional disturbances and sedentary lifestyles, which is lack of physical exercises. So all these things put together with what you consume, what you take inside, has a very bigger impact on your life. Now here, this picture will tell you something to talk about personalized medicine. Now here, if you go to ask your doctor whether it is correct. Now Albert Einstein, he says, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking when we used to create them. Is it true? Now we have now developed, we have now exposed to a lot of conventional foods. Now we are in a position where we cannot get away with them. So whether the lady on the right side is correct or the people on the right to the left side is correct is something, a balance which we need to think and decide. And at the most of the time, it is more to be personalized in nature. Now, yeah. So when you look into epigenetics, what does this epigenetics do? You know, epigenetics is basically by a group of enzymes called as DNA methyltransferases inhibition and epigenetics and gene activity. For example, if you take good foods, if you take healthy foods, and if you avoid these conventional foods which you get in the market, your dietary pattern will have a lot of influence on good signaling molecules which will keep your expression profile of genes normal. If not, your expression profiles will become completely altered, and this is what will happen. So everybody will talk about genes that they receive from the mother and father, but what actually requires is the cascade effects of behavior, whether we eat or whether we smoke or whether we drink or what chemicals and what components we get into the body is really responsible for our sustenance. So today we have a very great system of research called as Ayur Nutrigenomics, which talks more about preventive nutrition, promotive nutrition, participatory nutrition, and personalized nutrition, which means what food suits you. See, another important thing, India is a country where when you go every 200 kos or every 200 kilometers, there is a complete change in the food pattern, there is a complete change in the dietary pattern, lifestyle, the way they live, the way they dress, everything is different. Now, these were all more oriented towards a genetic group living in a closed area, very closely linked with the surrounding, closely linked with the environment. So the food that they eat, the kind of lifestyle that they lived in that area is more personalized, and it's more community oriented, and it's more geographical oriented. So today we have started moving away from eating such foods and such diets. So that is responsible for several problems which we face today. And when you look into the Indian traditional food science, which is based on the Tridoshas, namely Vata, Pitta and Kapha, and how we use the balance. So we have three things in our hand. The Prakriti. Prakriti is nothing but the nature with which you are born. That is your factory setting. The Samskriti, the environment in which you are developed, you grow. That is Samskriti. And finally, you have Vikriti, which is nothing but your choice. Whether should I exercise that choice or not to exercise that choice is in our hands. So what we are doing today is we are doing a wrong exercise of our choice, which we have in our hand. And that is responsible for several important aspects of unhealthy dietary patterns. Now, there are a lot of examples of molecules from Indian foods that keep your genes healthy. For example, curcumin, which is from turmeric, turmeric, neem, and basmati. These are the pride of our country, and these had wonderful molecules in them. Turmeric had a very important molecule called curcumin. The absorptive power of this curcumin is very low. That is why in most of our foods, we can see turmeric as a part. So this stimulates a very good system of inflammatory genes, and it's responsible for giving a lot of protection from diseases and several other aspects. Similarly, when you take fiber-borne food, whole cereals, legumes, spices, everything had a plethora of bioactive molecules and bioactive compounds, which are either responsible for supporting certain gene expression or maintaining the metabolism and inflammation at a normal level. So what I would like to say is we have moved completely away from consuming these foods, and we have started consuming foods which are completely not traditional in nature. As I told you, turmeric is the best anti-cancer spice that you can see. The next, similarly, the role of fermented foods is very, very important. Honey, as I told you, and ghee is nothing but Anna Shuddhi, which actually purifies your food, which actually removes bacteria from food particles. So ghee is very, very essential component of our diet. Similarly, the Malabar Coast people, they drink cumin water, which is jeera water, which is good for digestion. Similarly, rice is never it's not a diabetic linked molecule. It is very good in several components. As I told you, basmati, the wonder nut, nothing but the coconut, is a very, very good kalpavriksha, which is required for medium chain fatty acids. We have the rasam, which is the everyday anti-cancer stuff which we can have. The spice dabba, which has got a mix of spice. the individual components of the spice are required. Holy basil is again another component. The ahara, or the traditional concept of personalized food, is very, very important for a healthy lifestyle. So what we have done is we have completely moved away from this, and the way we try to have food, like using fingers, as I told you, the panchabhuta, how we have to sit and eat the food, like either using vajrasana or sukhasana, and using hands to eat your food is also very, very important. And we have, above all this, we have gone to a concept of adultering our foods with lot of chemical agents. And today you can see microplastics available in every component of what you eat. Even the mother's milk have got microplastics. That is a very important signal that we give. Now, cells, as I tell, we are bio-intelligent beings. We are miniature robots with spirit, programmable through food, thought, and breath. Ourselves, living expressions of this cosmic order. So I would like to conclude by telling that when you keep your cells healthy, you will also definitely have a healthy lifestyle and a longevity in life. And we'll also be able to pass on a sustainable DNA, a DNA which is devoid of errors, devoid of any faults or any nonsense in it to the next generation. So with this, I conclude my lecture, and I thank the organizer for giving me an opportunity to speak about this lecture. Usually this lecture runs for about 3 hours. I give a lot of experimental studies through this lecture, but since the time is short, I just gave you a bird's eye view of how your cells are very important. Taking care of your cells is very important in the current context, because several younger generation are now inflicted with diseases called as lifestyle disorders and lifestyle diseases, and that is also responsible for their illness or sickness that they come across in their life. So thank you so much for giving me an opportunity, and if there are any questions, I can answer one or two.
Very nice presentation and detailed about the ourselves, samskara, yoga, ayurveda, panchakarma, mahabhuta. So all these are related to our daily life, and also the living habits you have explained very much perfectly and effectively. Thank you, sir, for your studious speech on this topic. We get more deep knowledge from you about our health and the inner cell of the health, working of the health. Now the discussion session is ongoing. If anyone want to discuss with our speaker, you can unmute.
There is somebody.
Good evening, Dr. BETKAR, sir. Good evening, Ashwin, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, I am very thankful for your nice presentation.
Thank you.
Sir, my question is, how salts support to sales?
I didn't get you. How? I
Sir,
didn't get you. How?
We consume salt, sir, every day. What is the role of salts to build up the cells?
Okay, see, okay. So when you know cells are basically made up of molecules, you know, the basic building blocks are carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Now, these salts, there are a variety of salt. I don't know which salt you are asking, whether it is sodium chloride or whatever.
Sodium chloride, sir. NaCl.
Sodium chloride. In little amounts, sodium per se, it is not used as sodium chloride. It is used as ions, sodium and chloride separately. Now, for most of the... Pardon?
सांझ हो जाते, रात हो जाते, रात हो जाते.
If somebody is asking. So for most of the cellular functioning, for receiving signals from the external, you require these ions, that is sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, chloride, hydrogen, so on and so forth. So excess of these salts are actually dangerous in getting a wrong signal into the cell. I hope you are able to get the concept. So if you consume more of these salts, if you consume excess of these salts, any salt, whether it is calcium or sodium or potassium or whatever, beyond a level, they are going to alter how the cells are going to respond to the stimuli. You understand? I will tell you with one small example with calcium. Calcium, a divalent cation, Ca2 plus, is essentially required for all cellular functioning. Similarly, sodium is also required for all cellular functioning. Now, calcium has a very important aspect that calcium will never be exposed to the cytoplasm. It will be stored inside the endoplasmic reticulum. Whenever there is a stimuli, and there cannot be a position where there is no stimuli, whenever there is a stimuli, there is something called calcium-induced calcium release. So some calcium will try to open up certain receptors and there will be an upsurge of calcium. And when you have this upsurge of calcium, some gene expressions are turned on. For example, during learning and memory process also, this calcium upsurge is required in combination with sodium and potassium. So any amount of high levels of these salts in the body will ultimately have a deleterious effect on the expression pattern of certain genes. Certain genes may either be turned on or certain genes may be turned off, or they may be moderately or highly expressed. So that is where salts are very important in development. This is with reference to gene expression. Salts are also required for growth and development of the cells. You need a basic amount of salts for the cells to grow and metabolize. But if you put too much of salt, sodium chloride itself, too much of sodium chloride can reverse the osmolarity of the cells. Because, cells have more of water inside. 70% of the cellular content is water. So if you pump a high salt solution from outside, the salt concentration is high from outside and low from inside. Water from inside can flow into the external environment. So what normally happens is that the cells will now start getting dehydrated. So this is when the cell starts getting dehydrated. Most of the cells, inside the cell, you have something called as a biological clock. The cells respond to the stimuli, and the biological clock also responds and adjusts itself to the stimuli. So when cells are exposed to stress, now when you provide high salt content, it is a stress to the cell. The cells will not move in the biological cell cycle. It will stop at a phase called as a G1 phase. It's called as a G1 arrest. It will stop there. So when the cell starts getting arrested there, or sometimes when the cells do not get arrested and pass on to that, they inflict some damage to their DNA during the synthetic phase. And if the G2 phase, in the second phase also, if they are not arrested, the cells starts getting damaged. So this is another mechanism of how to circumvent stress by the cell. See, high salt is actually a stress content to the cell, but basal requirements of salts are required for the cells to grow and divide. I think I have answered you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Very much detailed answer. So we are very proud that our speaker is holding patents, also active in education field and doing research for the better living of the human health. Chemical free natural products he is producing and is a need of this today's hour. So great work by you, sir, for the society. We congratulate you for your achievement and future plans. Also, best wishes for your new products in future.
Thank you so much. I have shared my email address in the group, in the WhatsApp chat, in the group chat. So if you have any questions or something, you are free, feel free to contact me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank
If
you, sir.
anyone want to discuss, you can discuss, or it's the time of concluding.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable time with us, and we get very great knowledge from you.
Thank you.
And in future also, you will be here for new topic on new topic,
Definitely.
and you can support us by sharing few speakers. Already, I
Yeah,
have
definitely.
received 2 speakers from you.
Yeah, already
Yeah,
I think I've given 3 speakers. 2 more are there. I'll share their contacts
yeah,
to you.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for
Thank
your
you so much.
support.
Thank you.